Bus fare, because everybody needs a little bus fare every now and again. I'm going to do some what I like to call folk rap with no musical accompaniment. I'm going to try to speak clearly and loudly, and hopefully you like it. The first is going to be a warm-up. It's going to be a little bit short. I hope you like it. Oh, can I have my water, please? Thank you. The business cycle repeats, replete with cash movement, useless statistics reflecting direct money to phantom futures and first growth forest private interests, consuming the world for private gain. The cranes come alive, then sleep. Business cycle pains, the shame, the second to ultimate generations, guilt, watching their kids pick through the rubble of what they built, like space-age technologies, high-definition camera phone, documents food riots, soils and social contracts he wrote, food fights and food violence hidden in the distribution mode, exploding global expositions of resistance, I suppose. Exploding global expositions of resistance, I suppose. One could perhaps frame the question in a more technical prose. The gist is just uncertainty, the list of all the known unknowns. Burying bones, we was digging the graves of strangers, feeding on the wages of slaves, and we were dreaming of days that we couldn't put into words. Beat our short-handled shovels into rifles and swords. And that's the first one. Yeah!
Yeah!
Oh, man. Okay, so the next one is called Things We Know. It's based on a article I read in the New York Times a couple years back when Mosul was first liberated by the Iraqi armed forces. The mayor of Mosul, who was not president at the time, said there was no capacity, government capacity, to clean up all the bodies in the streets and in the buildings. So he recommended, as an official policy, to just let the stray dogs eat the bodies. And it made me think, well, people are so fatigued, like compassion fatigued, about seeing children die in war and suffer and be refugees and things like that. But what about if you just drove them, try to cut through that compassion fatigue with a song about dogs dying? So here we go. Yes. Things we know. South Indian food is spicy, cars are mechanical. You can buy oranges at the grocery store and puppies are flammable. They say war is hell but sell it branded like tramadol samples from attractive sales reps. The work is goddamnable. Thankless, gainful, logistical logic of Hannibal. Arbenz knows war is fought on the margins by marginals, on the shoulders of titans with titanical arsenals. Arsons orfanos, armas prontito armados, unseen into expedient TV screen promise of Constantine. Liberators armed with jelly gasoline. The puppies and their humans turn to embers and self-wiggling, while former warriors and their sponsor satellite survey city issues from space. Just in case, just cases emerge in another place, hunkered in bunkers and abortions, counting sunken costs and fortune. Sword forges horses and defoliant fumes. Too soon while planning for planetary capital constabulary expansion, the prime imperial military imperative. Flight marshal cadavers to Dover mortuary. Mourning mothers are like monuments, and fathers necessarily loot the dead, leave the flesh. 2 feet sad, abandoned pets. Who's a good girl? Victor's best friend, but she digests the body parts in pieces, upending the nose and sensibilities. And pieces, what they call it, the violent stability, ostensibly defense against systemic collapse, the cascading consequences for the capitalist class. Prudentially proactive, preemptive attacks on essentially closed markets of recalcitrant Iraqs, because they're running low on real things in which to invest. And this ghost economy is on the top of what's left. And if it's true exclusive use exclusion, then property is theft. But what's the difference when our fortunes ride on best bubbles and debts, phosphorus bombing raids, Pompeian graves, paving ways for capital noisily, snowing ash half doggy, half shrapnel.
Woo!
Woo! Yeah!
Oh, thank you. Okay, and this last one is based mostly on a paper I wrote for at UD about food, like cereal future speculation, and how things can get a little out of hand and starve people to death just by people trading derivatives on a computer screen somewhere half around the world can take food out of somebody else's mouth. All right. Shit, how's this one start? Okay, got it. The tragedy of the commons is the cultural traumas of its shattering by kings with cutlass and katanas, Really soldiers, surveyors, and sheriffs upon us so as to tear up community from its ancient context, compiling registers of land tenures for governments and investors, selling mortgages against the graves of the ancestors, urging surveying catastrophe, fantastic catastrophe, violently when the valley is at carrying capacity, paucity, dearth of earth, current currency that has to be subverts familiar affiliation somewhat nastily, collateral security, indemnity, surety, dispose us on a default, removed from one eternally, having to hold, to cultivate, not control, by a commercial class concentrating property titles. How long before the legal order incites the insightful, poorly paid peons, blessed, rightful, wretched, reach for their rifles to take back their natural heritage after the night falls, vertical sentiments stifle 7 sabbatical cycles when cancellation of debts returns assets from the syndicates, from the Code of Hammurabi to the Book of Leviticus, from the revolution engendered by the Porfiriato, the redistributive Justicia de Emiliana, when the Chiapas response to land reform scandal in Article 27 was annulled by the Comisionado. Catalanos converge, asked us them together to eat, counting our blessings while wars waged on wars of peace. Sheltered in Belfont, but haunted in sleep by invisible violence running vacuously deep. For those who possess the earth and all its treasures they seek, employ a zero-sum measure in the ledger they keep, knowing that the first shall be last, and the last in due course take their seat, and that their only saving grace is what they did for the least. Ultimately, they'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Anastasia lies awake every July 17th, while Anastasiosa most have fled but never found peace, because the children of barbarians are tomorrow's priests, who successfully overturn things, inspire, repeat, though we coordinate their efforts to uncrown the elite with their econometric ethic that denies the humanity of individuals trying to keep together family and live in a community with culture, not with enemy, to promote health and sanity conveniently and handily. How many muse on Mises' commodity character of labor, advocate the Protestant ethic, worship a socialist savior, and were they born with bootstraps filled with admirable behavior, enterprising creatures with the excuse me. Enterprising creatures with the compassion of the jailer take the most objectionable economic theory, attach moral value as to come dissonant of church parents, school Boy Scouts, and now do all the wealth accumulation they got to justify shit, just decontextualize the passages from the Old Testament as the cartoonish villains cutting loose a monster. That's the market, consumes all. In his gaping maw, it's a cabal of bankers legislating, regulators deregulating. A dangerous beast clanging and clamoring to draw all relationships between people and things unto itself between people and the food that they eat, mediated by a middleman that they'll never meet, and his invisible hand and the invisible feet of financial engineering devised for the elite. Wolves coming at you in the wool of the sheep, the miller and the baker bidding on next year's wheat with the investor, these blessed, the poor and the meek, inheriting a world where they cannot compete. Caricatures that they bad banks are everlasting, even if top hats and capes are currently out of fashion, from the cleansing of Herod's temple and the subsequent passion to counter insurgency policy coming straight out of Chase Manhattan, from the bellies of the powers, maniacal laughter echo from their towers, building the future thereafter, where futures feed from outdated constraints of pastures and the food can freely flow. Laws get laxer when the game speeds up, and the money moves faster between exchange-traded commodity index trackers. The hungry mother with her child pleading to the pastor as the trucks laden with loaves, leaves right past her. Not managing a market can generate disaster like fire, a great servant but a terrible master.